Hello and welcome. My name is Nicholas Hall, founder and president of Graham's Foundation, and I'm your host for today's Preemie Parent Chat with Adam Wood. Adam is a dad to 25-weeker Brady and a children's author and the founder of Preemie Adventures. I founded Graham's Foundation in 2009 in memory of my son, who died as a result of his premature birth. Our mission is to inform and guide parents of preemies so that they may confidently navigate the journey of prematurity. We provide support through our Care Package program, Preemie Parent Mentor program, our My Preemie mobile app, and our online community. So with that, I'd like to welcome Adam.
Thanks for having me, Nicholas. I
Hey,
appreciate it.
absolutely. Good to see you this evening.
Good to see you. And a wonderful intro. I love it.
Yeah. So, love to dive right in and talk more about your experience. And quite an experience, quite a birth experience. And I'm curious. I know you shared that you and your wife went through several rounds of in vitro fertilization and loss as well. There's a number of I don't know what the statistics are. I've said this before. I'd love to kind of know more about it, but there perhaps maybe some correlation between folks that have a hard time getting pregnant and have experiences other than the kind of typical term healthy baby. That being said, as most parents know, so much of it is random, and it's difficult to tell and to know exactly why our babies come early. But maybe if you could share with our audience just a little bit more, if you could, about the journey that you and your wife, and I'm sorry, her name is, I know
Jen.
Brady's name.
Jen.
Okay,
Yep.
great. If you could share maybe just a little bit more about, your journey to becoming pregnant and why IVF, what some of the things that you took into consideration.
Certainly. And thanks again for having me on. Yeah, a lot of families go through the IVF process. It's a pretty common process, and there is a lot of correlation in studies. And I've kind of looked at between prematurity and, as we know, multiple births. Typically, that's multiple births. So then when you have two or more, that tends to lead to prematurity, early birth, and that happened with people that I know in my own family with that. So we knew that was a potential risk with IVF, with anything else when you're doing that. But the good benefits is that you're always being tracked throughout the process more than a normal term birth when you're going through that, because you're constantly seeing OBGYNs, your IVF individuals, in correlation.
You automatically qualify for extra set of eyes.
Yeah, everyone's looking at your uterus. Everyone's looking at everything. So
your uterus or Jen's?
Well, Jen's uterus, but I think we're a team, so it's a shared uterus, so to speak.
Absolutely, that's right. That's right.
But we actually went through IVF because my wife has a disease called polycystic kidney disease, PKD, which is a genetic disorder that basically has cysts that are on the kidneys and eventually get to the point where they break down the kidneys and you eventually need a kidney transplant. And my wife actually did end up needing a kidney transplant much sooner, as I'll kind of allude to, about 2 years ago as a result of prematurity, preeclampsia, and her polycystic kidney disease. So her mom had a transplant, other people had a transplant, but only about 50% of eggs carry that. So we originally went through IVF as a precautionary to see maybe there's a possibility not passing that on, because she had battled and kept that since she was 6 years old, having to take medication, blood pressure. And again, if you can take that out of the scope of what a child has to go through and deal with, it's certainly something that parents do consider. We went through the process at Yale New Haven here in Connecticut. We weren't able to find the gene. We looked in family history that was able to be a precursor and understand that, but we still continued to go through the IVF process regardless of it. And we had multiple iterations where Yale New Haven was very clinical. We would go through insemination and do all of that, and then we'd have loss a few days later. And that's just hard because women are going through so much of that process. And for me, it was an eye-opener to have to be able to learn how to do injections, learn how
Yeah.
to do the timed injections, and I'm
Yes.
constantly sticking needles in, and that's a different way that you interact with your spouse.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's a very different process than the old-fashioned way, which I'm sure
Yeah.
most of us much rather prefer. But we went through the process a number of times
Mm,
before we finally got to the point where we said, you know, this is probably going to be it for us.
mm, mm,
Maybe we take a break. We're just not
mm.
sure.
Yeah.
And that's when we were able to get pregnant. We actually had gone to another more holistic kind of feel called CNY in Albany, New York, and they were really wonderful. My wife went up 2 hours twice a week, one way. She got lipid injections and drips that help with the birth to be able to have the eggs, I guess, develop quicker. I mean, she tried everything
Yeah.
in the kitchen sink, and we got to the point where he started to track, a little bit behind, and he had early signs and symptoms of IUGR, and that's kind of when we started to learn.
Intrauterine growth restriction for all those.
Yes,
I know most
for
of our community most of our
yes,
community understands a lot of those acronyms, but um, after 20 years in the corporate world, I was the person that always stopped and said
oh, that's true.
whatever the acronym was, because everybody has their own speak, right?
Right.
We have our own language. So, um, can I just back up for 1 second?
Yeah.
When they when they moved the embryo, was it one? Did they move one embryo and that became Brady, or were there multiple? Did
In
they?
this one, it was one because what we were kind of finding is that the egg quality wasn't as great in each one. So they were taking basically the best of the best and
Hmm,
going through that process. So, they looked for a lot of different things that they do.
yeah.
And we went through that process and said, this is the
Hmm,
best one we have. And we moved forward with it. And we hoped and
hmm,
prayed like a lot of families do.
yeah.
More than anything. And, we got to the point at 10 weeks, we found out we were having a boy, and I was overjoyed. And
Wow.
we just continued to monitor that whole process. And again,
And what? How
he
many? How
always had,
many at that point? How many times had you
I
gotten
think
to that process of are we pregnant or aren't we?
I think we were at like 5 or 6 at that point. We were
Wow.
at 5 or 6 times. And
Wow.
again, you're restarting that process. It's a whole
Yeah.
long month of prep injections, dailies, and then
Mm,
you're back to that, and that takes a toll on a woman's body. I mean, before she even gets pregnant, she's getting injections and
oh
hormones,
yeah.
and it looked her whole body was black and blue in her stomach
Mm,
area because all the injections I was having to give her or she was having to give herself. So
mm,
people that go through that, it's not easy, and you're doing most of it, which I think is the other thing a lot of people don't realize is that they charge you all this money, or they charge your insurance, and then say this is the most important thing in your life. Oh, here you go, here's a YouTube on how to properly mix it and time it correctly and how to give an injection, and expect you to be a doctor. And I was thinking that the entire time that the doctor was going to be doing all the injections, and
oh
I just had
no.
to sit back. And that's a big thing you realize very early, and you have to get out of your comfort zone. So if you're somebody that
Mm,
doesn't like blood or needles, you've got to figure out how to get past that,
yeah.
because
Or
you got
maybe
to move
have
forward.
or if you have, find out if your friends are nurses or find
No,
somebody,
nobody
right?
like find somebody. Pay
Yeah.
somebody off Craigslist or something. I don't know, whatever.
Adam, so we are gonna obviously as you're here because we're talking about premature birth and Brady was born early, and we're going to talk about that. But I am, in terms of support, I mean, you're talking about the physical toll, but obviously it's a mental toll as well. I'm curious, did you or your wife find support, whether formally, informally, therapists, friends, family, others that had experience with this journey?
With
Just
IVF or with the
yeah,
NICU?
with IVF.
Not really. So I mean, there
Yeah,
were some people there they had on staff at CNY, psychologists and people you could talk to. I think they have some stuff. And my wife's company had great benefits, so they provided some in-network assistance to talk to people if you wanted to have that.
yeah,
And then you have some friends and family you might lean on and say, "Hey, I know you went through this." But overall, I think it's a very solo experience with you and your spouse kind of experiencing that. It's very intimate. It's
yeah,
emotional because you're got so much invested in it. And
Yeah.
I think it's hard when you have to, much like the NICU, you have to relive the ups and downs. And when you have
Yeah.
all these people in your life involved, when in the highs of the highs, they're great, and the lows of the lows, it's hard to share with
Yeah.
30 people versus one or two.
Yeah.
But yeah, a
No.
little bit. I don't think we took advantage of it. I think we just, worked with each other and talked to each other, and we talked with, our parents or friends
Sure.
about certain things. But overall, I think we kept it close to heart.
Yeah. No, I understand. And you were sharing, so before I kind of backed up, we'll go back to where you were sharing. They were noticing, they thought that perhaps Brady, because they know exactly when the conception, because they did it,
Mm-hmm.
they know exactly how many weeks along, and they have expectations of where the baby should be, and so that they felt like he was tracking behind what they expected. Yeah.
Yep. I think even from 10 weeks on, even when you're looking at that, we were kind of looking at it's a little bit smaller, and then it slowly progressed, and you'd get some, okay, we've had good days, and then they'd say, well, they're a
Yeah.
little bit behind where we'd like to be at 14 weeks, 15 weeks, but let's keep going. Let's keep up with this. And then you get to the point where we're at 23 weeks, 24 weeks, and we're having a different conversation at that point. And
Yeah.
that
Say
leading
more.
into
Yeah. Say more about that, if you
so
would.
it's hard because you're sitting having these conversations and they're talking about the potential for abortion and termination, and
Yeah.
now you're taking a whole nother conversation, and you went through hell and back to just get to this point, and now the doctors are doing what they need to do, I guess, and I understand that. But when you're talking to parents that want babies so bad, and there's so many parents out there that really try so hard and they want to be parents, and you're throwing that word out there, and saying, well, we might want to talk about that now. I'm glad that we didn't talk about that then. I'm glad we didn't entertain that, because if we'd have entertained that, who knew if we'd have Brady now? If we'd have talked to some of those doctors at, you know, 21 weeks, 22 weeks that said,
Mm.
maybe there's a possibility we might want to think about that, and, he might not have a quality of life, they were very wrong in hindsight. So we went through so much of that. It was such an emotional toll. And then every time you see and you talk to a doctor, and they say, well, he's tracking a little behind, it breaks a little part of your heart, because a little
Yeah.
part of your, am I going to be a parent? And am I going to be a dad? Am I going to be a mom? And my wife wanted to be a mom so much, and I wanted
Mhm.
to be a dad so much that
Mm.
every time you heard that, it just felt like a dagger in your heart, and you just wanted to try to stay positive. But it's
Yeah.
hard sometimes to stay positive when medical people are telling you and trying to prepare you for the worst case scenario, rather than focus on the best case scenario, where I think is really where they need to be more focused in on.
Yeah. I'm hearing that from other parents. I think that there's probably a balance there somewhere. And in my in my experience, there were some of the nurses and doctors maybe were a little bit better skilled at um, being able to share what they as best that they knew and understood, um, but also with empathy as well. I think that it's a difficult job. They're seeing dozens, hundreds of parents just like you and just like me on a day in and day out basis. And so they're looking at it across their career, across their lifetime, across all their experiences. And you're looking at it and I'm looking at it in that one experience. It's like
Yep.
it's your baby's alive or not, healthy or not. It's not. Um, there is no 40% chance of getting ROP. Your baby either experiences that or it
It
doesn't,
doesn't. Yeah.
right? So, um, and with as you know, with premature birth, I mean, it's not our babies aren't really babies. They're
No.
fetuses,
Yep.
and so they like all these things still have to develop. And so ultimately there is no crystal ball, and it is it is difficult. I can appreciate that. So I guess when they saw that Brady wasn't developing as well as they would have liked, was there also was your wife's health also being
Yeah,
impacted by the pregnancy as well? So
of course.
there was that they were taking into consideration.
Yes, actually, about 22 and a half weeks, she was admitted to the ICU with high blood pressure. And for her, polycystic kidney disease, you already have high blood pressure. That's something that they manage. So when you take into that factor, and now preeclampsia, which is a leading cause of a lot of premature births and a lot of reasons why, and you take that into consideration, it's a major factor.
Yeah,
We spent a week in the ICU monitoring her for her life and the baby,
yeah,
and then having to continue to have daily monitoring coming back to the hospital leading up to his birth. But we had to get readmitted at 24 and 3 days into the hospital again after we had gotten out for a week.
yeah,
And we're back in there to monitor. And they said, at this point, here until you deliver, we want to try to get you to 28 weeks. And I had no idea what 28 weeks looked like, let alone 25 or 24 weeks, and what that would be
yeah,
like. And it was probably the scariest time to have to walk in every day and be there with her. And is today going to be the day? But it seemed like from the doctors and nurses, this is a common thing where, yeah, we can totally get you 3 weeks sitting in the hospital. But I don't know what kind of quality of life that was going to be for my wife, having to already spent a week there. Now you're telling her she's got to be on bed rest in this hospital, uncomfortable for another 3 weeks or more.
yeah.
That was definitely a hard pill to swallow, but I guess one she was definitely willing to do.
Yeah, I mean, we had this, it's kind of a very similar experience. Our twins were delivered at 25 weeks, 3 days, I think. But we were only on bed rest for a few days. I was hoping for a few weeks. That's
Yes,
what I mean.
same thing.
It's one of those. It's one of those. It's one of those interesting sort of yin yang where normally, if you're admitted to the hospital, your hope is that you get out quickly, because getting out quickly means you heal
That's good.
quickly. They fixed you quick, like that's usually good.
Yeah,
If you get out quickly with premature birth, chances are it's because your baby didn't survive or you didn't bring. If you're there quickly, if you're not there a long time, it's not necessarily often not a good thing. So it's kind of
right.
it's the yin and the yang of that. So I guess then since he was delivered at 25 weeks, they obviously said, okay. And I don't know how much they talked to you about it, but I suspect it was. I'm sure they talked to you about it. I think they probably were like your wife's health is at risk, and so that plus the development or lack thereof of your son for your son. Um, and I guess they had. I'm sure they had time to do the magnesium drip, so you got to
Yep.
experience.
Yep. I'm
That's
very well aware of that.
yeah. It's
Well, not me, but my wife at
I know.
least.
Let's just thank. I just thank our lucky stars that we are not administered
Uh, we'd
that.
be
Right?
terrible at it. Men are terrible with that sort of stuff. We could take physical pain, but like sick and all that, oh, we are so horrible at it.
We're not the
So
best.
horrible.
So share more about that experience. That kind of doctors talking to you and I don't know if it was much of a I don't know if it was much of a decision or if it was more of this is what we need to do.
I think it was more of what we need to do. I came in on a Friday and walked in and saw my wife there and had a little stuffy from the gift shop, to give to her to make her feel good. And she said, "Oh, you're going to be a dad today, and we're going to deliver at noon." And I'm like, what?" And I'm like, "He's 25 weeks," and I was just like panicked, and I didn't even
Mm,
try to Google anything at that point. I think I
yeah,
was just
yeah,
shocked.
yeah,
And so I'm texting my dad and my in-laws like, she's going to give birth today. It's going down. all of this, and they're getting me all scrubbed up and ready to go, and it's just not the experience that you picture in your head of going to the hospital. You're so excited, you're just so nerve wracked, and you just don't know if this is going to be the best day of my life or the worst day of my life. In a
Yeah.
weird way, it was kind of both, in the way everything kind of develops out. But I'm having to be there for her, and they're giving her the drip, and they're setting everything up pretty quickly, and I'm just there to help her out and talk to her. And we really weren't able to see anything. We were just behind this big Wizard of Oz kind of cloak and hearing people working back there. And it's the funny part is you're prepped your whole life, especially if you don't have kids already.
Mm.
You're prepped your whole life to imagine the mom gives birth in every movie and every show, and you hear the loud scream, and it's a boy, it's a girl, and you hear that thing, and everyone's relieved, and you don't hear that at all. It's like a pin could drop in there, and it's the scariest thing because now you're thinking, are they alive? What's happening? Somebody give me some updates there. And luckily they gave us some updates and really wished him away to the next room, so we didn't get a chance to see him at all.
Yeah.
And that process. And I just kept thinking in my head, we have a whole trimester. I mean, 15 weeks is a long time, and I hadn't even gotten through the books. I hadn't painted the room. We hadn't decorated. And you think about what preemie parents go through, you lose out on everything. The baby shower, the fun things that you do together, all those amazing things that you enjoy for pregnancy, the cravings that you hadn't quite got to yet, like where your wife can eat pickles and peanut butter and not feel weird about it, and it's all gone. And
Yeah.
I just kept thinking, like,
You
what is he
can't
going to
turn
look
off.
like?
Yeah, you can't turn off those automated emails that keep
Yeah,
coming
nothing.
from all the pregnancy sites.
Like, I
Yeah.
haven't done the Lamaze class. We've signed up for it, but I don't know what else to do. So,
Yeah.
and then you're just left with your thoughts of imagining in your head, what is a preemie going to be like at this early, and
Yeah.
what's the survival rate? Because unless you've dealt with it and you've talked to somebody who's had one, you don't even know if they're going to survive at all. You just in your head, you're trying not to go to the most negative place you can be, but part of you is sitting there and it's popping in, and you're just trying to prepare yourself, as well as, I think, as a guy, mentally, for the worst case scenario, so that you can find a way to comfort your spouse and be there for them. And I think part of me was just trying to prepare myself for that if I needed to do that, because I had no clue what to expect. Nobody prepped me other than coming down a little bit to the NICU and showing me what it was about an hour before. But I wasn't given a tour and saying, oh, this is a 25 or 24 week. This is a baby that's this. We have babies that survive all the time at this rate. Like, nobody was telling me that. Maybe they could have, or maybe they don't do that for some reason. But I just felt like I've got to be ready for everything. And it was definitely an eye-opening experience the first time, seeing him and going through that.
So so obviously Brady's, they transfer him to the neonatal intensive care unit, but your wife has to recover from the C-section. Was she able to see or hold or spend time? Like how long was it until she had a chance to?
She was at least 24 hours. She was at least 24 hours. And so he actually, before he got whisked away, they have a small side room in the delivery room where they brought him in. And they said to me, do you want to come in, Dad, and see him? And part of me, as I've told this many times on many occasions to different people, I was conflicted. Part of me wanted to go there and see my son and relay it back to my wife and just take some positive out of this experience and be there for him and the miracle that it was. Another part of me said no, because my wife wasn't going to get a chance to see him again, being robbed of all these firsts, all these things that she was missing out on, and then I was going to take that. And you don't often see that, where the dad gets to see the baby first. Only in this kind of realm of prematurity and babies that are in the NICU and they have these situations, does the dad get to see them first and be kind of the point person. And she just said, go, please go, and went in there. And just watched a team of doctors hand pump him. Like one person was assigned, went to medical school to hand pump his lungs while they put him in this bag and they're getting this stuff and you're trying to take pictures or just absorb it and then they're off again.
Yeah.
And it was hard because I was like so emotional. I was like, okay, he's a living, breathing thing. He's not deformed like I thought in my mind. He's not some kind of doesn't have hands formed yet or anything like I maybe thought in my head. And he looks pretty good as far as I can tell. And then they went away and I went down with him afterwards and got my wife settled. We got her into the room and she's still drugged up and they're like, okay, now it's time to pump. And you're like, she's about three months early on this one before she's ready to do that. And I was surprised that 3 months early, she started to be able to produce milk.
Wow.
Within an hour after drugged up, I literally had to hold her up, and she's probably embarrassed by this, but hold her up because she couldn't feel anything so that she could lean in and start to produce, which is huge. To be able to produce any, and a lot of moms struggle with that. It's a hard thing.
Yeah.
She was able to produce some, which I think was helpful in the process. Emotionally, yeah.
Yeah, emotionally, even, yeah.
Yeah, and that could be emotions can play a lot into why they don't produce and the stress of all that. It's hard.
Yeah.
But brought that down in those little syringes and getting all this information thrown at me and getting to see him first. And the nurse, the head nurse there is telling me everything. And I'm looking at the wires. And as you can see in the bottom right, that's day one. That's basically what he looked like. And it was just very overwhelming. The monitors and the lights, the beeping. And then I have to go back and kind of tell my wife what's going on. And you kind of have to be able to put on a poker face.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to be able to temper your emotions and be able to relay the information in a positive way so that she's not stressed out and worried, although she's still going to be.
Yeah.
And then she was able to finally see him the next day and maybe the next day and a half until she was able to come down and wheel him down and see him for the first time. And I think for her, it definitely felt like an out-of-body experience. It was definitely hard for her to see him like that. I had, a whole day to process, and she only was in that moment. So I think a lot of times it's hard for moms and dads to see them, and it's hard to make that immediate connection. You don't know what to do, and you don't want to touch them. The wires are there, and the glass is there, and the lights are there, and it's not what you imagined in your head. And I think you try to stay as positive as you can. But I think the message for anybody is that it's okay if you're having doubts and you're having things in your head and you're worried, because I think that's completely normal. And I think if you weren't worried and had that stuff, there might be, something you need to be concerned about then. But it was definitely hard for her to connect until a few days after, maybe a week or two after, we were able to connect a little bit more. And I think there's different things along the way that helped that.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about, kind of transition now to talk more about your journey in the neonatal intensive care unit and, how you guys got through it, how you found support, what was helpful, maybe what wasn't helpful. So maybe if you could just share with our audience a little bit more about what that journey was like for you and for Jen.
Well, the journey was certainly a long one. We were there for 4.5 months, 135 days, and
you beat me by 16. There's certain stats that preemie parents know. One is like how many days you were in the NICU.
It's like a prison sentence. You know that. Like, how long were you in for? I was in 135 days and 2 hours. Like, yes, that's right. But it doesn't matter how long you're in, and everyone will tell you. I mean, yes, I would definitely prefer to be in for like a week versus 4.5 months, but it's hard. It's difficult to be there. And we had a lot of ups and downs. We had a lot of close calls. He was off and on the vent, the oscillator almost daily. And that's one thing you have to prepare yourself in the NICU is it is a marathon. And those first few weeks will wipe you out. The the mental breakdown, and the NICU will wipe you out no matter how physically fit you are. I felt like I ran 40 miles a day those first few weeks coming out of that NICU every day. I felt so exhausted from just, and all I did was sit there.
Yeah.
And it's definitely one of those things you have to pace yourself for and realize that you're going to have the ups and downs. And I think that's something that the nurses told me, but I think once you live it and you start to see it and you see others around you and you start to get in that realm of like, okay, he's having a good day today. Let's hope it stays. And they're up and down on their PEEP. They're up and down on all their machines. And at one point we had nitrous blends. We were on CPAP. I mean, everything that I felt like the NICU had, I felt like we were on, and we were that family.
Mm.
And it was hard because I had another family right across, a girl who was a 25 weeker who seemed to have no issues at all. They weren't on the oscillator, the ventilator. It seemed like they were having a crystal clear journey, and I was happy for them, but I was also like, well, what do we need to do to get to that point? Or, what are we doing wrong?
Yeah, it's, I think you bring up a good point. I think one of the reasons why I think our mentor program is particularly powerful and attractive to parents that are currently going through their journey is that our parents have already gone through it. They've been away from it. So they're not gonna be comparing, another parent. It's a peer, but it's not someone
That's
there
right next
next
door.
there. Yeah, I remember when we were first in the NICU ourselves. Within the first week, we could tell that there was a it was a baby that was really sick. The isolate was always covered, and you could just tell the doctors and nurses were having difficult conversations with the parents, and ultimately that baby did pass away. And then you would see, to your point, you'd see other parents, other babies seemingly in a similar situation, um, that were doing really, really well. Seemingly, and
Yeah,
it's hard not to feel a little bit of envy for those other parents that, again, that appears that they're, and it's none of it's not right, wrong, good, bad, or it's the emotions of the roller coaster.
that's right.
Um, and so while you were in the NICU, was there anything, from a support perspective, whether it was family, did they have mentors, did they have pizza lunch on Tuesday? I don't know what year. I mean,
2018.
okay, so pre-COVID, everything. I mean, COVID has had is just such a dramatically different.
It did prepare me though for COVID because I was already pre-ready with all the Purell and everything by the time it hit.
Yeah,
So
right.
you're already used to secluding. You're like, oh, this is a Tuesday for me. What are you talking about, rest of the world? So,
I
but
know. Actually, first saw, when I first realized the impact that COVID was going to have on us, just sort of day-to-day life, I was just thinking like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen with parents in the neonatal intensive care unit? That's just going to be impossible, and it's probably going to set us back a little bit in some ways. And that's what I understand, is that they're having a difficult time getting volunteers back. Kind of, devastated a lot of family advisory programs and
support
mentor
systems,
programs.
everything.
Yeah, everything
Yeah,
kind of, yeah.
we
So,
couldn't even get, people couldn't donate to the hospitals. My niece actually went through at the same hospital, so she had me as a support system because she knew about everything that we went through. So she could always call on me, and I could even call the nurses and be like, well, my niece is there, make sure, they get in the care. And she had twins in different hospitals. So then they had to,
wow,
each one, they couldn't be in the same hospital at the same time. And I talked to dozens of parents that same thing. Oh, my husband couldn't be there. So now you imagine, now you can't have your spouse with you or your partner with you while you're going through that. So now you're living it twice as much alone. So
yeah,
you spend 8 to 10 hours alone with your baby, and then you switch off, and then you try to talk about it. I can't imagine that.
yeah.
And have that everything's. But to go back to your support, unfortunately, we didn't have anything at that point in our hospital. Maybe that they have now, like grams or anything else like that. There was no. I don't know if I even had access to the app whenever the app would have came out. That would have been great to have, the Preemie app and be able to have access to that stuff. The most we really had is, I think, a couple of classes which were really mandated to before your baby gets out and how to take care of them.
Yeah.
We really couldn't talk to other families, even the families across, if they would let you. They were so strict that we would literally have to drop off like notes to them. Almost
Really?
like it was like, seriously, we would have the couple across. They
Mm.
would constantly give us thumbs up if they overheard rounds that Brady did good and we missed out. But if we walked over there, the nurses would stop us or the staff. And it was ridiculous to the point where it
Mm.
was like KGB
Mm.
kind of stuff. Like,
Oh, wow.
we're not trying to, they're giving me permission, and you're already alone, and that was frustrating. But you could always go outside and talk with them in the hall, but
Yeah.
they're too tired.
Were
So we
you
didn't have
were you in an open?
open. Yep.
Yeah.
So we had two wings, but we had little bay areas, so it was open.
Yeah.
But unfortunately not. And hopefully there are. I know that there are in Connecticut, like in Connecticut here, Tiny Miracles is the one that really is in Connecticut, but it's not all of Connecticut. It's
Yeah.
most
It's
of southern.
Fairfield
Yeah,
County.
Fairfield County, which is great, but we don't have a lot of stuff up there. So it's always a great opportunity for people to get in and find an area where you can help out and get with. And I love the fact that there are so many organizations or just people that
Yeah.
are doing the work to help out because there's a need. Because we can't be everywhere, and I
Well,
wish to
and
God it was there.
yeah, I think the reality with today's, with the healthcare system, the reality is that the baby is the patient.
Yep.
We the parents, we feel everything. We are like we are the emotional. We're carrying everything, all the emotion that our babies are going through and feeling, but we're not the patient. So there's literally no budget. We are up and above the sort of daily care of the baby. So
Right.
it does make it a challenge. I'm curious, were you at more of a, and the name of the hospital doesn't matter, but were you at more of a community-based
No, it was
hospital?
one of the
No?
actually the ironic part is one of the best in Connecticut. We were at Connecticut Children's, which is part of Hartford Hospital, but it's
Okay.
the only children's dedicated one in Connecticut.
Yeah,
Um, and
interesting.
it just policy, and the weird part is that our hospital had all these weird policies. Even donating to the hospital became an arduous situation with red tape. And you and I have talked, off how hard that can be just to even do simple acts of kindness. It has to go through all this red
Oh,
tape to
yeah.
do that,
No,
and it's frustrating.
yeah,
Like
we had a bunch of people donate money to the NICU where Graham and Reese were. And we literally wanted to, I don't know, 20, 25 grand. We wanted to just get some like lockers for parents. This particular NICU, and you find out when you're in it as long as I am, you find out that every NICU is
yeah,
its own little business, and it's set up, the way it is, where it is. They're all a little bit different, but ours, didn't have a reclining chair, didn't have a lockers, didn't have things that you would, if you know that you're
seemingly think
if you
you would
know
seemingly
that
think.
if you know that you're going to likely have parents there for a long, period of time, there'd be some basic. Long story short, ultimately, we were not able to direct any of the funds that were donated. Because it was a small amount of a big foundation. And look, I was in corporate America for 20 years too long, and I understand that they're just the bigger, the more complex. There's more hoops, more, and some of them are I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that it takes some hoops to become a neonatologist and to become a. I'm
Yeah, yeah,
grateful for some hoops.
100%, 100%
some
agree.
some some hoops are good and some are incredibly frustrating. Um, and part of the reason why Grams, unlike like Tiny Miracles, focuses exclusively on a set number of NICUs in an area, and they have people on the ground inside the NICU. That's kind of the path they've chosen. I chose a path of we're not going to get involved in your red tape. That also means that we're not going to be, the
That's
support organization, so to
for
speak.
hospitals. Yeah.
Yeah, but plenty of them just simply they recommend us. We're in their welcome kits. Um, and I think in a lot of the NICUs that maybe are unlike a children's that a hospital routinely gets, um, higher number of parents like yourself that have babies born early. There are plenty that maybe they get a dozen families a year or
Yeah.
a couple dozen where they really need that kind of long-term support, but it's not on a consistent basis. And I
Right.
think we're particularly even more attractive for those particular NICUs. But interesting. So did you guys have was so Brady was and they delivered there as well? Like a lot of times children's
So
hospitals don't deliver as
they don't
well.
deliver. So they had the interesting part about that is the children's hospital is directly located. They actually have an underground and above ground area that connects the children's hospital to Hartford Hospital. But they
Okay.
also rent out the NICU is directly below the delivery maternity. They have one floor that is part of Hartford Hospital is technically Connecticut Children's.
Yeah.
So while you're going through Hartford Hospital, you're going into Connecticut Children's and you're really dealing with the nurses and staff there, so it's that inner network of people. I didn't really care as long as my kid was getting taken care
Yeah.
of,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it was definitely interesting, and there's a lot of things that they had to do when they went to surgical. They went to the underground to take them for surgical and things like that. So, again, it would be great to have more services. A thing I've also found out is that most of the NICUs that you talk to, and I've talked with a number of nurses too, they don't have mental health people on staff for the doctors and nurses either. So
Yeah.
you think about the loss that they see every day, and you can't not let that get to you. I mean, when you go in to help kids into a field like that,
Yeah.
that every time that a little part of you, hurts when that happens,
Mm.
and you got to be able to have staff. And it's amazing that they don't. I've talked to so many, and I'm like, well, do you have a psychologist on staff so that you maybe have a patient, you have a family, it's very unique, you have loss, and no, they might have somebody out of network you might be able to get to, but
Yeah.
nobody there. And I think that's a lost opportunity where hospitals can allocate funds or money or donations to use that kind of staff for both parents and doctors in the hospital and be ready to go, just like you'd have a chaplain or somebody
Yeah.
like that. I think every hospital, especially these that are one or level 3, 4, these NICUs that take kids for long times, they need to have something like that. And
Yeah.
people that maybe that understand what it's like to have be a NICU parent.
Yeah. I feel like parents should have to opt out of like mental support, not have to qualify
Yeah, like you
in.
got no, you're going,
You're
you need
you're
to.
going. You're gonna really have to prove because there's parents. It's rarely are we return customers. Very few, right? It happens sometimes, but very few.
Yep,
And so it literally is every day could be the last day um, that you're in the NICU, that you're there.
yep,
Any day is you're on the edge of life or death. Um, and that's the reality of it. And there's just any way to understand and appreciate what that toll is taking on you. I'm curious, Adam, how I mean I could guess ways that you helped to get yourself through those 125 days, given that you've written a few books and have done a lot of done a lot of great things in to make sense of your journey. So I'm curious, was that was that part of the way? Did you do some writing and things like that while Brady was in the NICU?
I actually did not do any writing while I was in the NICU. My
Mm,
primary focus was point person while I was there.
mm.
Wife was be with him. Doctors, you're coming through me. I was the holding them accountable. Why aren't we doing this? Have we tried that? Like
You were
you
bad
better
cop.
report. Oh, I was yeah, I was that asshole. And my wife just was like, I love that your personality comes out in this, that you can take care of that, because that is assertiveness, how I was, and allowed me to be able to
Mm,
impact the care, feel more connected. Yeah, you're doing the kangaroo care, you're reading, you're doing all the important things, but then
yeah,
to be able to be an advocate, and I think dads sometimes take a back seat to the advocacy part of that, and I think that's something that we can do, because we typically in our lives are typically advocating. We're typically in a lot of roles where maybe we're the alpha, we're leading, we're doing all these things like that. You can take those assets that you have in your professional life or personal life and use them for good. And you just got to figure out how can I use this in the NICU. And you've had a lot of jobs, and you've worked in corporate America. There's aspects of that you can take in. Maybe it's the analytical side. Maybe it's the understanding that there's all things that you can take from your personality that you do well
yeah,
and help change that thing and help you navigate through the NICU a little bit more. But for me, getting through it, it was just focused on him. I got to a point where I really realized I have to also get some sleep, take care of myself,
mm,
take some time for me, whether it's go for a
mhm,
run, even if
yeah,
I'm guilty about, like, I got to be there. You can't be there 24 hours a day. Anybody who's watching, it's impossible.
yeah,
Every hour you're there, it's exhausting. And yeah, you want to be there. And we were there 10, 12 hours a day, but it
yeah,
gets to the point where you got to take time for yourself to do something, and don't feel as guilty about it. Yes, probably don't go clubbing with the girls or boys on a Friday night, but go out and have a nice dinner, not being in the cafeteria. It's
yeah,
okay to do that. It's okay, because you'll be recharged, and your baby will feel that recharged spirit and life, and you'll be able to be with them more,
mm,
interact with them more, and do all those
mm,
things. Um, and when I got out of the NICU, and then that's kind of a different story of how I got through things and processed things and what I did to adjust and take care of myself. But at the end of the day, I just really kept myself focused on what I could do to help that day, how I could be an asset to the situation, to the doctors and the staff, how I
yeah,
could support my wife. And I think that made me feel good, made me feel like I had worth, because I think
yeah,
sometimes when you're there and you're a dad and a father and a husband, um, you feel a little bit like you're worthless, because the
mm,
job you're supposed to have to protect your spouse, your wife, you're not doing, because she's in the hospital, even though it's not your fault, and
mm,
your child's in the NICU, and they're in there, and you can't take away the pain.
mm,
There's so many times we want to sit there and we beg and plead, and I've done it by the isolate in the chapel, and we say to
mm,
God, let me take everything. Like, just hook me up to all the wires, let them have
mm,
a nice day. But it doesn't work that way. And
yeah,
we go through a lot of we go through a lot of emotions, and we go through denial, we go through all those things of grief, we go through everything, and we go through bargaining. And I think that's very similar to what we deal with in life, and people deal with all kinds of adversity. It's the same thing happens in the NICU. You go through all those emotions at some point in your journey. You're probably going to go
yeah,
through them all.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, just thinking about it myself. We after losing Graham, just not going back. Daughter was still there. Just knew it was a possibility that we would go home without any babies. And we've met families, since then that's the reality that does happen, and can't imagine. Share with me joy and humor. Share with me in the daily wins. Tell me, give me a little bit of joy and humor. And
Well,
have you taken this? Are you doing any stand up with it?
actually, it's funny. I have thought about that, but I think that the joy and the humor is what got me through the NICU a lot. I joked around a lot with the staff. We had a respiratory therapist named that was there, and named Cliff, and he and I would jab at each other, and people would be like, "What are you doing?" And it got me through that time.
Mm,
It got me through the military when I had, I was on deployments and I was away, and it helped me through so many things in my life to be able to process and compartmentalize, that I just try to find the humor in things, and also try to find the joy and the milestones, the positives, and try to look at it from that way of rather than saying, let's think about all the bad things that happened and all this happening. Let's look at the wins. Let's look at the day that he was off of CPAP or he got to wear his
Yeah.
first outfit and celebrate that, because it's, again, it's so unique to preemie families, is that
Yeah.
you celebrate things completely different. Your first hold could be days or weeks. Your first bath could be a month. Who knows how long? Your first
Yeah.
outfit, open crib without having all this stuff. It's very unique, but you have to
Yeah.
learn how to be able to sit back and say, today was a really great day. We had a great win, and to lean on that more than you lean on all the other bad stuff that's happening. And a lot of, there's a lot of bad stuff and ups and downs. But I
Yeah.
think when I was able to start doing that, I felt more positive and was able to start to see the finish line. And then I kind of carried that humor into, creating Preemie adventures and books, and kind of why I did that.
Yeah. Share with us a little bit about that, and also Brady's 5 now.
It'll be 5 next week, 5 next
Wow.
Thursday.
Happy
Yep.
birthday, Brady. So,
Thank you.
yeah, no, I'd love to hear, a little bit, some of the joys and wins for your son, Brady, as well. But tell us a little bit about the books that you wrote.
So I wrote my first book was right as COVID was hitting. We were kind of all secluded, and I wanted to find a way to give back. We had been blessed with him, coming so far and getting a second chance at life that we
Yeah.
didn't think we'd have. So I originally had created the Preemie Adventures social media to share as an outlet for me to share my thoughts
Yeah.
in and out of the NICU, and a lot of people enjoyed it and they thought it was funny and they could relate. They could say, "Man, I just went through this," or "I was just thinking this and I don't feel alone." And I kind of thought, it would be great to kind of take this to the next level. And I remember sitting in the NICU reading all those books to him and then looking up and saying, there's not a lot of stuff for preemies online. Like, you look
Yeah.
on preemies, even clothes, you look at all the stuff. It's typically stuff created by a parent,
Yeah.
even for like feeding tubes, G tubes, you name it. It's a parent that's typically creating it because they saw a need, or a nonprofit. There's a need
Yeah.
in this area. So we
Yeah.
create it. So I said, well, I don't know how to do a nonprofit and I don't know anything about that, but let me write down some ideas. And I said, why don't I share a story about the wins, the
Mm.
milestones, but also let it be funny, because parents need to laugh a little. So I wrote my first book, Our Preemie Adventure, and it was a celebration of the milestones we went through, from um, what I thought about when they told me kangaroo care was. And I'm thinking about, well, why do we have kangaroos in the NICU? And the first time I changed a diaper and it was stinky, and the first time he got to wear an outfit, and when he came off CPAP, and all the little intricacies that
Mm.
preemie parents and NICU parents understand. And I
Yeah.
wanted it to be something that a parent could sit there like me and say, wow, there was a dad that had a 25 weeker. It was just over a pound.
Yeah.
And they were there for 4.5 months and they made it, and he made this book. And the funny thing is that after I wrote the book, about a year or two later, the same nurse, the same nurse that took care of Brady, gave my book to somebody that was in the exact same situation, the exact same
Mm.
isolate that we were at, and said, this is somebody that was here just like you 3 years ago, and he wrote this book. And she cried because it was
Mm.
just everything she was going through. I wanted it to be a book about the NICU, but it's for parents. It's a different stage book. While you're reading it, it's a way for you to say, here's a story for me that I can read, and I can look forward to my kids. I can
Yeah.
look forward to the bath. We haven't hit that yet, but I can't wait. And to maybe mark down the milestones when that happens on there. But it's
Mm.
just as much for the parent to be able to celebrate all the positives, to look back and say that was the best day, or you start telling to your friends, oh, you remember when Brady did this, or so and so did this? That was so funny. And you start laughing about things, and you start thinking about all the good things that are in there, and that's what you
Mm.
dwell on, and it replaces all the negative. And then later on, you can show your kid, like when he's Brady's age now, this is what you went through, but it's not
Mm.
scary. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's humorous. Um, and after I wrote the first book, um, the NICU doc on social media, Dr. Prem Fort, he reached out to me and he said, I love the book. I love educating parents. Let's write some books together. So we were able to write 2 books this past year. One's called Our Respiratory Adventure, which is this book right here,
Excellent. Yes.
a NICU story, and it again, it uses humor. It talks about
Nice.
the expectations for parents. You're going to have highs and lows. It's
Yeah.
the good messaging, but it's also educates them and allows them to be able to get a very easy to digest reason on what you're using. What's CPAP?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do we use caffeine? Why do we use this? And but it also looks at it from my perspective as the parent on how I see the NICU. And it was funny when we wrote it, he said, "Is that how parents really see the NICU or see the oscillator or see this?" I said, "You bet your bottom dollar." I was like, "Check my social media. Like people are laughing about this or sharing their stories. That's how parents look at it." And
Mm.
he was able to like take that and say, maybe I need to change my approach, or we would tell
Mm.
stories about things. And I think it allowed them to see that. And it
Nice.
celebrates the doctors too and the nurses. And then we wrote our last book, A NICU Christmas Story, because it was a wonderful way for me to be able to also share a great story that I think is universal, and it's more encompassing because it's not just about preemies, it's about just kids in the hospital or the NICU,
Yeah.
and how Santa Claus works with their brothers and sisters to help bring them home. And that's a message that a lot of people can identify with, of the
Mm.
importance of family, hope, but also a lot of families spend a lot of time in the NICU in the hospital during the holidays.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And I want it to be something that they could read at any point, but they could have a celebration. And we have plans to write more and more books and
Nice.
have unique perspectives for different parents so that they don't feel alone, and that, if they're sitting in that isolate and they
Mm.
don't know anybody, they can at least pick up a book and feel like, hey, there's a lot of people like me that are going through this, and I'm not alone, and I'm okay to feel like this. And
Yeah.
I think it's been really well. It's been a great way for me to take everything that's happened and put it into a positive, um, and to put it out there and have other people enjoy it. And it's been a pleasure and a blessing to
Mm.
have it be so well received so far.
Oh, that's fantastic, Adam. And one of the things that you pointed out about navigating the NICU together is healing through helping others, right? And I mean
Yep.
that's why I share with people. I started Graham's Foundation. One of the reasons was to help me heal,
Yep.
but also knowing that there would be other families that were going to face very similar circumstance, and if I could help create an organization that would give other parents like me a place to express that desire to give back, because we know through all of our journeys that we were helped by so many people along the way, right? Staff, friends, family, in the best ways that they knew how.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't been through it, um, and even if you go through it, I went through it, but I went through my journey. I went
Right.
through my experience, and I did it, and I healed and managed and processed the best that I knew how. But I know Adam and your wife, we all have we have our own path, our own journey. But being able to help others makes a difference for that other person, but also obviously makes a difference for us as well. Um, yeah, so I really admire the work that you're doing. So just before we wrap up, tell us how is Brady doing? He's 5.
He
Unbelievable.
is the most amazing kid. I know everyone says that about their kids, and it's cliche, but he's the most amazing kid to me.
Mm,
Um, he's done so well. He's overcome so much
mm,
every single day. He
mm.
overcomes the odds. He is so smart. He loves doing puzzles. The kid's 4 years old, about to be 5, and does 200 and 300 piece puzzles, and will go to the
Wow.
store and is like, and he's put them together. He loves books. I mean, he literally is probably, if I go up right now, is sleeping on 5 or 6 books in his bed.
Wow.
He loves searching and finding and using his brain. So I think that's always a worry that your kid, when you're in the NICU, like long term, what's going to happen. Yeah, he's klutzy sometimes, but we love him, and
Yeah.
he's an amazing kid. He's so funny. articulate. He's got a great personality, and I'm incredibly blessed to have him. And every time I get a chance, I'm overjoyed to be able to spend the time I have with him, because I didn't think I was going to have that, and I always keep that close to my heart. And I think a lot of parents that are preemie and NICU parents, I think all the experiences you have after you go through all that, it just means a little bit more. Like you just like all the little things you take back and you just enjoy it a little bit more, or you just sit back and watch. Maybe other parents are like, okay, great, and you just look at it and say, man, I didn't think this day would ever come, and here I am doing it. But he's just an amazing kid. He's going to be 5 on the 25th, and we're just looking forward to more milestones with him, and continuing to pay it forward for the second chance that we got, because I'm enjoying my best life with him, and whatever that's got to be. But it's definitely going to be continuing to advocate for preemie and NICU parents, helping them, paying it forward in any capacity. I mean, I don't think this will ever be something I'll stop doing, because it does warm my heart. It does make me feel really good to help somebody in any capacity, whether it's just talking to them, whether it's sharing their story, whether it's creating something that's going to be enjoyable for them, or just being a friendly ear to listen to for a dad or a mom. Like, it makes it makes everything be more meaningful in the experience. And I think that's the big thing that's come out of it, is that sometimes we try to find the meaning in tragedy and hardship and everything, and it's hard. We sit there and we question God, we question everything, we blame ourselves. And I I know that we went through everything that we went through so that I could do this. Because if you would have told me 7 years ago I'd be talking about preemies and NICU and doing stuff like this and writing children's books, let alone about the subject, I would have thought you're crazy. But sometimes God puts a certain part in our path, and then it's up to us to really take that and mold it into something positive and to help others. And if we can help one person be better off than what we had when we experienced it, then it's all worth it in the end for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, living our best path, right?
That's right. That's all you can do.
Yeah, Adam, we covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, first, I just want to again thank you for having me on, and your organization is fantastic. And anybody that's watching this is obviously,
Well,
so certainly donate, give them time, whatever it would be to support your organization, and any organization that's out there that's helping. And if anybody's looking for other resources, things like that, you could certainly check out premieadventures.com. I've got podcasts, books other parents have wrote, resources, including grants that's on there, volunteering opportunities. And we're working on right now creating some dads groups that are on there. So if there are some dads out there that are looking to be in some groups and talk and get a chance to, we're going to be starting up that this coming up month. We've had a few already, but we're looking to just get a little bit more so that dads can feel supported in a safe area.
yeah, that's fantastic. I've often said I like to think that preemie parents, that we have there's this net that is below there to catch you and to help support you along the journey. And Graham's and your books, like, we're all a contribution to that net,
That's
and
right.
we don't, and we just want to be there. We want to be there when the need arises. So thanks again for spending your time with us, and all the good that you're doing for dads and moms and preemie families out there. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Adam.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet. So before we wrap up today, I do want to just take a moment to thank Sage Therapeutics and Biogen for their underwriting of today's Preemie Parent Chat. And also a big thank you to our Preemie Parent community for placing your trust in us to provide you with information and guidance to help you confidently navigate the journey of prematurity.